can get going here. I'd love to do that. Two things I was going to mention right off the bat. One, thank you. Thanks for being here. I know everybody has things going on, and 2 hours on any given Monday night or Tuesday night is a lot. So thank you, and thank you for your wisdom and your insight and your input into the process. I greatly appreciate it. And the second thing I told Casey I was going to say is, it is my desire that the intelligence of the group speak. And I will just ask you, if I start saying things that are out of line or that are not allowing you to speak, you have all of my permission and freedom to tell me to please be quiet and let someone else talk. I don't know many of my shortcomings, there's a lot, but I do know that one. So that would be a waste of your time and a lack of respect for you, and that's not what I want to communicate. So if we can understand that we'll have that agreement, that you will have the freedom to say things to me, then I think we'll be a lot better off all the way around. So with that being said, let's call to order and welcome and thank you for being here. And the second item on our agenda is a consideration of approval of meeting minutes from June 25th of 2024. They are in your packet. Entertain any comments or corrections to that or a motion to approve them at your leisure.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Bud, and thank you.
I wasn't seconding.
Richard did, sorry. I've been asked to call out who says things, and so thank you, Bud Brown and Richard, thank you. Any comments or other discussion on the minutes?
I just, on item 5, on page 2 of it, where it talks about Kathy O'Connor's presentation, I took a little exception to the fact that she recommended that the board focus on street projects. I think she suggested that, but I don't think she would be making a recommendation of what we're supposed to do. And so I think that the terminology is important to recognize that she's here as an advisor to us, but she's not here to tell us which way to go. And I'm sorry, Kathy.
Yeah, my recommendation was in a memo to the city council, so that, it was my recommendation.
Okay, to the city council.
Yes,
But not to
and
us.
I think that's what it says.
Okay.
Her recommendation to the city council regarding a general obligation bond.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay.
Is that, are we good, Todd?
Okay.
Any other comments or questions before we vote on the minutes? We have a motion and a second. Do I have to roll call vote this, Casey?
If you would, please, just quickly, you should have a roster sheet underneath all of your stuff there.
All right. Please respond when I call your name. Brian Blundell.
Yes.
James Buxton.
Yes.
Sean Conrad.
Yes.
Philip Frame.
Yes.
Bud Brown.
Yes.
Marcus Jones is absent. Kristen Kilgore.
Yes.
Mustafa, how do you say your last name?
Just say Cujo.
Well,
Yes.
okay. Thank you. Cujo. Jay Lemon.
Yes.
Caleb McCaleb.
Yes.
Jennifer Miller.
Yes.
Josh Moore.
Yes.
Todd Olberding.
Right. Yes.
Craig Perry.
Yes.
Brandon Rader. Jill Raines. Thank you. Janelle Randall.
Yes.
Richard Wright.
Yes.
Michelle Schaefer.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Kristen Strecker.
Yes.
Brett Town.
Yes.
Clint Thompson. Hardy Watkins.
Yes.
Todd McKenna's votes yes. The minutes passed. Third item on our agenda is discussion or review of additional resources. And there's a list of items that have been provided to you in your packet. The CIP 5-year outlay, the Edmond property tax millage rates, the Edmond sales tax breakdown, Edmond shift prioritized projects, GeoBond timeline for the November election schedule, and GeoBond key points. I think we have a staff comment on that. Before we do, I'd like to take a few minutes and ask for there to be a general opinion or discussion of where people think there exist today with respect to millage rates. And the reason I want to do that is I think there's two schools of thought. Either I don't know how to pick a project until I know how much money to spend, or how would I know how much money I'm going to spend until I pick a project? So somebody's got to be the first penguin off the iceberg, the way I look at it. And so I would like there to be a general idea as to what people are thinking. You had a sheet last week that looked a lot like this that Chris and Alan Brooks provided as a frame of reference. So At the risk of opening the door, I would like to have that discussion now to the extent people have opinions about that as we move forward. Because I believe Andy's going to walk us through some financing or resources the city has for revenue, I think. Is that correct? So as we can prepare to do that, I'd like to just get a general discussion going, and people are nodding their head yes, so I think that sounds encouraging to me.
So just to clarify, this item is further along in the agenda, you're moving it up.
Well, I'm moving the discussion of the review of additional resources right where it is. I'm not asking for any consideration. I'm asking for input as we look at the resources we have available to us and maybe considering.
Okay.
Thank you, Casey. Brian Blundell.
Sure, I'll start. I mean, as a CPA kind of guy that's trying to think the same way you are, I looked and said, okay, what number looks good? In my opinion, we talked last time between 10 and 15 millage rate. That seems appropriate. I think just a shade under 200 million, that put it about 12 and a half, 13 mils, I think. That seems like a pretty decent number, just what I was looking at. But no rhyme or reason other than that's a pretty good start. And I we covered what the school bonds do. And school bonds have been generally close to that. I think it sounds better if there's a one, if it's 195, 198, whatever. I think that probably sounds better than 2 to be the first one. No rhyme or reason other than that's about the primary, the millage rate that we kind of discussed a little bit, so.
Yes, sir. Sean, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So last week, Jay said something interesting before we left. He talked about kind of dreaming big, you know. And so I've been thinking about that for the past week. And I feel like we need to possibly begin with the end in mind and think about what do we feel comfortable asking the Edmond residents for? Like what are they going to feel good about? And because we've been taxed to death this year, and everything costs more. And so us to dream big right off the bat, and then just start asking for that amount of money, maybe we should figure out how much we want to ask for, and then fit the programs into that.
Fair enough. Yeah, Richard.
I agree with Brian. I think that rate is right because it's comparable to the other cities. Not that that's a selling point to somebody who hasn't paid it up to now, but I think that's fair considering the size of the city. But we just have to your point as well, get a sexy list of projects, and if roads are, I think roads are everybody's biggest concern, I think. But if that's not sexy enough to grab people, we have to, put something in there that people would really like as well. But, or spin it that the roads are going to deteriorate further if we don't do anything.
Thank you. I think we have 25 people because probably nobody's got a handle on what's important to everybody, but I appreciate your concept of that. Other comments generally, Rick?
Yes.
Smith?
Well, I've been trying to think of this in terms of, of course, we're talking about a tax increase. Everybody realizes that. I've been trying to think of it in terms of percentage increase. And just roughly, the total millage rate for all of Edmond, schools, VOTEC, everything, is around 104 mills right now. And so if you're talking 10 mil increase, that's about a 10% increase in taxes. 13 mil would be about a 13% increase in that way. 10% increase in tax sounds like a lot, but I think we need to focus on what people are going to get for that, if that is the number. I'm not sure really yet, Todd, what number I feel comfortable with. But I'm just thinking in terms of 10 to 15%, because that's how a lot of people are going to look at it when they start talking about it.
Thank you for your perspective. Yeah, as we move through the agenda, that's why I would like to have these items, just kind of people thinking about it from my limited. Yes, Todd?
I would just like to suggest a 10-year duration. I think that 5 is too short and 15 is impossible. It just seems like it's hard to predict the future. And without getting out there 10 years, we're not going to really have enough money to do much of anything. So,
Okay. Thank you. Janet?
I'd follow up on that, I think whatever it is we sell, and if we get this passed, it has to be long enough that the people can start seeing some progress done. And it takes a little while to get some of these projects engineered, utility cleared, right away, all of that stuff. And so showing some positivity to this before it comes up again. Hopefully gains momentum and you can create something that Edmond can count on going forward. My concern is most of the projects, as best I can tell, appear to be projects that have been identified for a number of years. And so there just hasn't been a funding level to the appetite of all the projects that have been identified for many years. And so I don't know that a 10-year program successful gets Edmond set for the future, but it starts to make a long ways of playing catch up for things that we hadn't got done in the past.
Well, I think once you pass one, it's easier to pass the next one.
Yeah.
Or to get through the first one. I'd be a little concerned about going out 10 years on project costs, even if, because with what we're seeing now, even 2%, we're looking at, if we could get to 2% inflation rate, and it seems to be more in construction items, we see a lot of that. You know, copper fluctuates, steel fluctuates, concrete, it's all over the place, labor. If we were to put a project on and say in the 9th year or 10th year where this is what we want to fund, we may not have the money for that. So what happens in a case like that?
We're going to talk about that in a minute, Todd, when we get to the resources, and because I have a couple questions for Kathy that might be more relevant as we get to the term and the issues related to 70% identification in general and what happens with excess funds. And so she's going to be prepared to discuss that in a little bit, if that's okay with you, Todd. Yeah, Jay. Oh, I'm sorry. Jay Bucks, go ahead.
I want to try to do a visual if I can, and this is not very scientific or it's not as good as a PowerPoint. All the good projects that have been built in Edmond in the last 24 years have been built out of capital projects or its successor, which is now CIP. It generates $18 million a year, that 3/4% dedicated sales tax. Then along came the, I'm going to call it the Public Safety Center tax, which was renewed, and it generates $12 million a year. So together, the $30 million a year, that's a lot of money. That's a robust fund. So going forward, we ought to be in pretty good shape. Not so fast. This fund disappears in 3 years, unless it's renewed. So now we're down to $18 million a year. And the $18 million a year, we ought to be able to do some pretty cool stuff. Not so fast. It owes $12 million a year for money it's already borrowed. So this goes from $30 million a year down to $6 million. So we've got this much money out of this that capital projects has going forward. So I guess we ought to be able to do some things with that. Not so fast. The street committee wants $4 million a year to do street overlays. So out of this $6 million, now you're down to about $2.5 million out of $30 million. And all of a sudden it looks like an entirely different picture. So I'm not sure where we go with that, but the city needs to, I think the city needs to dedicate some money to some long-term bondable projects. And I don't think street maintenance belongs in, is my opinion.
Thank you, Jay. Other comments? Yes.
The only thing I would add,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's just, so I have one comment and a question now. So, I mean, we probably just need to shoot for that sweet spot, something comparable to our neighboring communities, because right now it's 0. And Edmond is a growing city, and so we've got a lot of great ideas. None of the projects we're looking at are bad ideas, but they're not going to happen unless we get some sort of additional revenue. So something in that 10 to 15% range, and we can go ahead and, you know, discuss what the right length of time is on there, but my suspicion is it'll probably land around 10 years too. But, you know, we can work around that, we can have a goal. But in looking at those projected funds, and this is probably a question for the city, so, you know, we have those 5, 7, 10-year outlays for different millage rates and such, and how much we should expect to come on in for each of those. Is that based on current data? We're building a lot of houses out in East Edmond, and that's going to be a lot more like tax base too. Is it taking into account some growth rate, or what's that projection?
That's about a 3% growth rate on it. So
Those values are based on a 3% growth?
2 to 3%, I believe, is the number. So,
Yeah, home values too. All right. So That's the way I would-
Yeah, that's all right, yes.
No, I just was gonna say, I thought the most illustrative point last week leaving was that Edmond is kind of a two-legged stool in a three-legged region. And I think that it's really, I know it's a heavy lift, but the reality is this is the right time to be having this discussion for the sustainability of our future at the level that we want this community to be. I think your view is a really good one, and I think it speaks to the heavy lift of the first time that we're trying to do this, because it's gonna feel big, but in the grand scheme of things, we're just making ourselves competitive with, frankly, cities that we consider not to be at the level that Edmond is as a community. And so I thought that was a really good illustration last week. I think we are not opening up all the funding that we should to be the community we want to be.
Yes.
I don't know if this is too much in the weeds, but what's the term of the debt, the $12 million in debt for the police station and some of the other projects?
I'm gonna ask, when Andy's getting ready to come up, I believe, and.
15 years.
15?
Or he's just gonna yell it out from the back. Don't worry, sir. And I wanted to forestall our conversation, I wanted to get this discussion going, because one of two things has to happen. You gotta pick the project, you gotta pick your budget. And so that's where we're headed, and I believe Andy, and if anybody else has anything they want to say right this second, please do. If not, I want to keep us moving, because I think the meat of our conversation tonight is going to be about the projects, but Andy has some key information that's in your packet under this agenda item number 3, and I'd like him to be prepared to walk through it and people ask questions related to it. What we have now, which is what Jay was talking about, and what Richard just asked as well. So Andy, thank you for being here. Introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Yeah, Andy Conyers, Assistant City Manager of Administration, and one of the facets of my job is helping to oversee the capital projects program. You'll hear from other staff, so it takes a village, but I help a lot on the financial side of that. And Mr. Buxton pointed out some of this information, but I know last time the question was, well, how are non-utility capital projects funded now? So just attempted to do that through this and looking at the 5-year outlay. So lots of words, but to kind of hit the highlights. So this next fiscal year, which just started, I guess this fiscal year started today, $30 million worth of revenue, and then $12 million of that is going to pay off some outstanding debt obligations. So over a 5-year period of time, if you add up these buckets, and please stop me if you have any questions. So streets and mobility, $61 million. And then you have a $62 million for quality of life, and then $10 million to public safety. So $133 million worth of projects. And you'll see in a number of those projects that there's grant funds that the city has already obtained. So we're really trying to stretch these dollars as far as we can right now. And then I also went ahead and it denotes, if there's a star next to it, an asterisk next to it, it's a project that's already been identified in the list that was provided to you all during your first meeting. So by my calculations, there was a little over $37 million of projects that are in the 5-year that are also in the projects that are presented to you all. Now, again, that was not intended to be an exhaustive list, but it was just as staff is out in the community, as you are, being liaisons to boards and commissions, and then being a resource for council projects that over the many years have come up as priorities within the community.
One mind, Andy, just mentioning how a project gets from an idea to the CIP being a funding source for it?
Yeah, so I would say just a lot of times it's something that's been identified either through the council, through their strategic planning process, or just through a board or commission that ideas come up. As we see growth with a road project, we start to pay more attention to number of cars, number of accidents, things of that nature. Or quite frankly, it's just a project like AC Caplinger that we're about to kick off, our baseball field complex. Won't reveal my age, but I played there many years ago, and I would say that it hasn't changed very much since then. We've put Band-Aids on it and done the best we can. But that project budget for that is $17.5 million. And as Jay talked about earlier, when you do your 30 and your 12, that's 18. There goes all your money for your 2 CIP funds on a project that is a worthy project, but it's just choices that have to be made because things are long overdue. And so we've had lots of conversations with the council over the last year of, it's not project additions, it's project substitutions. So in these 2 funds, of which one, Casey, can you scroll to the breakdown of our sales tax? But of these two projects, which again, one of them sunsets March 31st of 2027, if another project comes along, it means that one of these projects that's scheduled in the 5-year has to go out. There is a little bit of contingency money just because we know costs are going to continue to increase, but there's no more available dollars for additional projects. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's, again, that's not trying to scare anybody. It's just the reality of making the best use of the funding mechanisms that the city of Edmond has at this point. So, and again, this is the sales tax breakdown. So the two funds that I'm referencing here are in your top right. So there's the permanent 3/4 cent and then the repurposed half cent that has been in existence since 2017 now that it's set to expire March 31st of 2027. Any questions on those?
Is the public safety and the fire, is that a permanent tax, the one that's point?
Yes, it is.
That's
Yeah.
permanent, okay.
Yeah, and they do fund some capital out of that, but primarily that's just operations. Yeah. There are some capital things out of that, but it's primarily just operations.
So the last fire station that was built was?
They have built up some reserves through the years, so Fire Station 6 that is under construction is being paid solely by fire reserves. So they've been very good stewards of that money and we're able to do that. But as we move forward to future stations, that's going to be a real challenge for the fire department to fund things in that manner.
The other thing I would like to ask is, up on your recap of cost there, it talks about second coal train work being funded for the engineering.
Yeah.
But the actual cost of the work that's going to be there isn't addressed. Is there thoughts on how that's going to be funded?
I think that we would have to have conversations with the council at this point about, with the Uncommon Ground project coming in second coal train, that if that is a priority, then something's going to have to get moved up. Or, sorry, something's going to have to go in order to fund that. But currently, as Todd points out, there's design money for that, $500,000. There's no construction money for that. So that would just have to be a conversation with them. Yes, sir.
Is there any concern with council or staff or anybody that if we get this streets and infrastructure bond issue passed and you have capital improvements that's going to come up, I'm assuming we're going to ask to re-up that.
Mm-hmm.
That there's the same kind of projects in both voted packages, for lack of a better term. In other words, there's quality of life projects in both, there's streets and roads and maintenance in both. And to me, there's some gray area to try and sell that to the voting public or differentiate it.
Sure.
And I
don't
know right or wrong about that.
Yeah, I don't either. I could see somebody making that case. I mean, it could be cleaner where you have one fund for your nuts and bolts, your roads, and you have one more for your cutting the ribbons and quality of life. I'm not sure that I would advocate either way for either one, but I could see that as far as messaging to the public, sure.
Yeah. Certainly take you a while to transition into doing that since they're.
Yeah, that's right.
Couldn't do it just anywhere.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I'm going to ask you about voter fatigue, and that may be something that the committee has a collective input on. But if we're going to ask them for however many dollars in November, and then Kathy O'Connor was saying last week that they've got to renew the 1% to operate the city sometime, I guess, in the spring. And then the renewal of the half-cent thing, that's kaboom, kaboom, kaboom.
The November election would include the 1 penny for operations. So the plan is to put at least 2 things on the ballot in November for the city of Edmond. One is to make the 1 penny for operations permanent, and the other would be the GO bond propositions. So that would be taken care of. The half penny for capital improvements expires in 2027, so there would need to be another election late in 2026, early in 2027 to renew that.
So you do not fear voter fatigue?
I don't, because I think people feel pretty strongly about Edmond. I mean, I think you heard Pat McFerrin talk last week about the polling, and that if you're bringing the right questions to the voters, if they're streets and transportation, quality of life, public safety, people are gonna vote yes for those. And because people want a great community, and they feel pretty strongly about that. So I think that, you know, is there voter fatigue in America in general? Possibly, but I don't know that that's anything that is being caused by the city of Edmond. I think that's more just general, you know, we're all kind of fed up with it. So hopefully when we get past this November, it'll get a little bit better, but.
I think they brought that up last time, though, is that the November election is going to happen regardless. It's the presidential election, and so it's advantageous to us to get it on the November. We have the option of delaying, but then there would be a voter fatigue issue if this thing slips into March or April.
Yeah,
So I think two
and
things.
I also think that, you know, like I said before, I do think that there's going to be other things that come up on the ballot in the future that you know, we all need to just be aware of. Oklahoma City's going to do a very big general obligation bond issue. There's the question of regional transit. There's other things that are out there. So, I mean, I think that Pat made a pretty strong case last week with the November election. You get a broader voter base. You get, you know, you'll get Republicans and Democrats, which you need to get these things passed. So I think that, you know, what Todd wants to try to do tonight is let's try to at least figure out how big is the pie that we're going to try to divide up tonight. So Todd, you mind if I try to get this? I heard quite a bit of support around 15 mills. Can we like raise our hands or nod our heads or something that we want to try to work towards 15 mills? And then I think it's the length of time between elections. And so we gave you a chart last week that talked about 5, 7, and 10 years. And I just think that you've all raised really good points. I think you could do 10 years, no problem. 7 years is maybe a good place to be. I think 5 years is too soon. I think then you do kind of risk maybe not making enough progress on the projects that you've gotten approved in the last bond issue and getting some criticism. But so at a 10-year at 15 mills, we're looking at about $230 million of projects, so pretty big hunk of money. At 7 years, it's about 150. So, you know, Chris Gander is here from BOK again tonight. We projected about 2.5% growth in ad valorem. I imagine Edmond could possibly grow faster than that. I imagine history shows that it has.
They've averaged 6 over 20.
So you've averaged 6. So even if you went for a 10-year authorization or 230 million, you would target the mill levy. So if assessed value grows more quickly than 2.5%, you're going to sell those bonds more quickly. And so it may not be a 10-year time horizon. It might end up being 7 or 8. I don't think it'll be less than that, but you know, we could run some numbers and get you that. But I think you have to realize that some of this is more art than science, frankly, that there's a little bit of a, you know, give and take to it. I think the important thing is to try to get how big is the pie going to be, and then let's start talking about what are the most important projects to the city of Edmond, to the people in Edmond. What are the ones that are going to have the broadest voter appeal? Somebody used the word, what are the sexy projects? I think that's important. And that they appeal to a wide geographic area in Edmond, so every ward, not just my pet project, but every, you know, something for everybody, frankly. And if you know, my recommendation was streets, because you have a pretty long list of street improvements. And then my idea with the half penny that expires in 2027 is that becomes kind of your quality of life tax issue, that you use that for parks and Lake Arcadia and the other things that, you know, you all want to do that are a little bit difficult and cumbersome to do with general obligation bonds because of the property ownership issues associated with those.
So Kathy, question on that though, you know, 'cause right now, it's 75% of those funds used for roads and street projects currently, that's what I've heard from the CIP committee. So how do you prevent that in the future? How do we know that doesn't happen again? If you have this geo bond of streets only, how do we know it doesn't go back there when this expires?
You
That's
don't,
my fear.
I mean, I think that's
Because I
up
look
to
at it and go, we have
your
a-
city
we have a
council.
Huge
and-
lack of
Yeah.
good quality of life
Yeah.
stuff, and so how do you prevent that?
I think
that
it's,
would be
you know,
the
whatever,
issue.
you know, citizen input you use for that process, your city council are obviously the ones who make the final decisions on how these things are structured and what projects are included. I think that's your, you know, that's where the line gets drawn in the dirt, but there is no guarantee. I mean, even in Oklahoma City with the MAPS projects, those are not geo bond projects, they're sales tax
But
projects.
that was my question. What's the thought process when they're putting the maps package together? I mean,
So MAPS is a sales tax, and it is voted on by the citizens as a capital improvement sales tax. That's what it says. Doesn't have all the 16 projects listed out on the ballot. Those are approved by the city council in a resolution. And then they're in implementation plans and in all kinds of other documents that the city council
they use those
approves.
projects to market that.
They absolutely do. And they make that decision about those projects ahead of time, and they vote on them, on what they will be ahead of time. And they do that with geo bond projects too.
So Kathy, I want to honor Casey's demand of me that I stay on the agenda. So,
Thank you.
I heard what you said, and you said exactly right. That is one of my goals as our group, is to get to those two big decisions. And the things you just mentioned would be, I think, contextual as we hear about those potential projects.
Yeah.
So before we do that, is there anything else on agenda item number 3, Casey, that's a presentation from staff that was planned?
No, we just provided a lot of resources, basically from questions that you had last time. So again, in there is specific information about if you live in Edmond, millage rates based upon school districts, the breakdown of sales tax, which Andy touched on. One of the documents you went over last time with Alan, we just wanted to attach that this time electronically. And then there was some talk about, you know, we were mentioning the timeline that we were working on, some of those dates. We just wanted to share that with you as well. So really, and then there's also, there were some questions about, you know, long-term planning for transportation projects. We gave you a section from the Edmond Shift Plan that identified those, and that was, how much time was spent on Edmond Shift, Randy?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. That was a big project that involved the community. So that's how, honestly, a lot of the projects that you see on the project list that was provided have come through that process as well. So those are all resources. That's the whole presentation.
Other questions of anybody up front here on any of the items that are presented on number 3? Just clarification or additional questions? Brian, please.
One quick point for the staff to bring up. I know last time Caleb talked about the Arcadia Lane stuff. Is that even something we can consider? Is that a different deal since we don't own the land? It has to be a special deal.
I believe 2 things about that, Brian. One, it'll be part of the items that are discussed, and then I think Kathy's going to have some more technical knowledge about what that looks like.
Okay.
So yeah, it will be identified and discussed. So, other questions about item number 3 that were presented, the materials, or anything along those lines? It's not speak now, but it's a good time. So.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, Jay.
Last week, we had the comparison of city property tax rates and all the other communities around us and so forth. And I don't know if you guys want to dig, but it's on page 68 of last week's packet. And there are 2 that are over 15 mils, Tulsa and Moore. So if we jumped in with 15, we'd be the largest in the metro except for Moore. 14 sounds better to me.
I will tell you, Oklahoma City's target is 16 mils. They just missed it because their assessed value grew faster than what they anticipated. So their target level for every time they sell bonds is 16 mils. You just miss it sometimes. And Edmond would be the same way. You're going to miss it sometimes. You won't be at exactly 15 or 14 every time you sell bonds. It'll be 15.5 or 14.2, or, it's just the way all the data comes in.
Well, the way I feel about it is, I don't want to be the highest tax city in the metro. And if the difference is a 0.5%, I'm all over. As silly as that sounds.
Thank you, Jay. It's a good comment.
Do we have to describe on the actual ballot all of the millage and all of that stuff? Because people are going to be very confused.
No, it is a list of projects. It is a dollar amount, and the dollar amount is taken into consideration because of what it does to the mill levy over time. But it's not in any of the ballot language.
So Kathy, would you walk us through the last time, and this is relevant to item number 4, that's where we're moving, everybody kept track. There was a discussion last week about the magic 70% number of what has to be identified as projects. So would you kind of give a little color, if you will, as to what happens? We do that for this purpose. Oklahoma City does a higher percentage usually. The accountability, what happens with excess money, excess projects, are they on the list? Just kind of, would you mind filling us in with respect to
And
that?
Alan, I may need your help with this a little bit too. So by state law, you have to specifically list with the dollar amount the projects, 70% of the money that you plan to spend for that specific use. So 70% of the money for streets has to be described in specific projects. At least 70%. 30% can be left as what's called unlisted money that has to still be used for streets, but the projects are not specifically identified. So that gives you a little bit of latitude for things that might come up over a 7 or 10 year time horizon, let's say. Cost increases, emergencies, things that happen. In Oklahoma City, I believe that they list more than 70% just as their practice. It can be 80%, it could be 90%. I think 70 to 80 is a good number and gives you good flexibility. But I think 90, you have that 10% may not be enough over especially a 7 to 10 year time horizon. So that's how that works.
So it seems like you want to put enough information in there that someone from any part of the city is going to see a project. So
Yep.
I'd vote for this just because of that.
Yep.
And some of the other parts, I'll vote for it just because that's in there.
That's
So
exactly
you have to
right.
have that sweet spot for the whole city.
Yeah, and you'll have, like let's say, you want to do streets, parks, and fire stations that are on the list. You'll have 3 questions on the ballot, at least. And, people choose. I mean, it's really interesting. People choose.
You said, for example, there'd be 3 items based on the discussion so far. Parks, infrastructure, and what?
Parks, streets, and fire stations.
Fire, okay, I didn't hear that first. Thank you so much. Under the idea that.
And it'll say something like streets, roads, so, it'll be longer than that. But yeah, and people choose. That's the only thing I would say, is people do, when they go to vote, they choose, they differentiate. They may vote yes on all of them, but some people don't. It's interesting to think about. So again, popular projects, no matter what the category, is going to be really important. So,
Thank you. Casey, are we going to ask Steve Lawrence to go first, or?
Whatever, however you'd like to approach it.
Well, so the biggest group, if you will, is the one that's in front of us, under your tab number 4 in your packet, I believe. Steve Lawrence is the city engineer, and if it's okay with him, I'll ask him to come up front, introduce himself, and kind of give us a little bit of history as to these projects, why they're on the list where they are. I know you got some information in your materials to talk about the metrics for prioritization, and some of that's relevant to you, some of it may not be, so. Yes, go ahead, Brett.
Next time, could we have this by wards? Because one of the most important things we're going to need to have is giving every ward an area.
We got awards identified but not categorized, so we'll do that.
So if we have it, then we can.
We'll put it by group. Thank you, Bud. Thank you,
Rick. Yeah. Thank you, that's a good idea.
So group this list by ward?
Yes,
Is that what you're asking
please.
for? Yeah.
And we'll, Casey might be able to send that out to us in the interim, possibly.
We'll get it to you this week.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm Steve Lawrence, city engineer. I've worked at the city for 25 years. 24 years of that has been working on city projects, so very familiar with kind of all these projects. Last 10 years, it's been working water, wastewater, because that's where we've been investing the most in our infrastructure of the city. So overall, these road project lists, these are very well vetted. They've been, you know, all the way from Stacy Trumbo in 1997, the city engineer saying Kelly and Covell need to be major corridors. The city identified that, council approved it. Since then, you know, early 2000s, we had committees. After the schools kind of took over the east of I-35 area, we knew development was going to change. So we did a study in the 2004-2005 time frame. We got a master plan in 2006. Pretty much addressed a lot of these road projects. And quite honestly, we've had more time and citizen committees than money. So a lot of those projects are still the same from the 2006 master plan that we had. You know, every 3 years or so, we'll go through and we'll update it for whatever's changed, growth patterns, whatever else has changed. Accident data is a big one. Level of service at intersections, which determines kind of the average delay time, is another big one. We've, you know, as a city, we've done quite a few surveys, and it's always, traffic is always number one. Roads is usually, you know, part of that. So, you know, we're doing things, I would say for the last 5 to 10 years, we've been trying to use technology to increase our ability to move traffic around Edmond quickly. That's our intelligent transportation system, ITS. You'll see one of the projects listed in here as Intelligent Transportation System Phase 5. As a city, I would say we're the most successful city in the metropolitan area as far as getting federal grants through ACOG. We have done a tremendous job because we've had to, right? City staff is very professional, very good at getting all the federal money that we can get. Lately, that federal money is a different formula. It's shifted to be more, that's why we went through the Edmond Shift program, is that those federal, one of the reasons that those federal dollars are now going towards multimodal transportation. They're looking at safety. The Edmond City Council adopted, as part of that Edmond Shift program, Vision Zero, which means we're going to try to, you know, reduce or eliminate the number of fatalities or serious injury in Edmond based on vehicle, you know, crashes. We don't say accidents anymore. So we've done a really good job of getting federal money. We'll continue to do that. We just want to leverage it as much as we can. You know, when you look at street overlay reconstruction, that's a big number we put up there. You know, part of that is, you know, as cities get older, we've got to maintain what we've got. And Edmond is actually getting to be an older city as far as a lot of the developable area has been developed. And so we do have, you know, quite a bit on the street reconstruction, resurfacing. We've got behind on it. I will say I've got a few kind of housekeeping things. I will say we did look at the Covell and Western intersection improvements. And these are all ranked based on current accidents. They're ranked based on projected traffic. They're projected level of service at each intersection. We're going to start focusing mainly on intersections because that is the cheapest way to get the most people moving and to minimize traffic. And so with that, Covell and Western, we looked at that. We can reduce that cost down to about $12 million. We can do it in phases. So I would mark that one from $22 million to $12 million. We have a lot of startup costs on transportation projects. We've got to buy the right of way. We've got to move the utilities. We've got to do all the same things at the beginning of a project, no matter how big that project sometimes is. So that's one issue. I would like to look at that. Covell and Western, we have figured out to get that down to $12 million. It will last us 5 to 10 years for traffic. The other one, the street overlay and reconstruction, getting people to vote on things. When I voted on Oklahoma City GeoBond 2007, I voted because it said, citywide resurfacing. And I knew I lived in Oklahoma City doesn't really resurface in the past. Historically, they've been really good at fixing potholes, but haven't done a lot of resurfacing. So I voted yes because I wanted my streets resurfaced. So that's one of those things that it appears, appeals to a broad audience. We get a lot of complaints, our city council members get a lot of complaints about our street pavement condition. So it's one of the highest rated things for us. I would say, as far as kind of looking at the overall costs and looking at what we're looking at with these committees, that probably reducing that to, roughly 5 million would be a year would be more likely, fit in with what you all are doing. I know it's part of this committee is to, figure out what we can get passed, right? We're just looking from a staff point of view for more money in the bucket because we've got a lot of things.
So are you saying you can do some good with 5 million a year?
We can do a lot of good with 5 million. It's so I think right now we're spending between 4 and 5 a year. I think that would be a good selling point, saying, hey, we can double that to 5, and it will make a big difference on the arterial roads. You will see a big difference.
Okay.
Getting back into neighborhoods, that'll be tougher, but we can work with that.
But are you saying you would no longer fund that from the CIP if you had it in here?
Well, we would need to keep funding it out of the CIP.
Okay.
And that's, we need to do more than we're doing.
Right.
How much more, I don't know.
So on a 7-year bond, that number is not 20 anymore, it's 35 million.
Well, and so if you look at the asterisks on that, that's the 20 million that was listed, that is an annual amount. And so, so if we went down to say 5 million on that, over 7 years, that'd be a $35 million expense in there.
Can I ask you one quick question?
You bet.
Why is it because of the gas that Covell and Coltrane, that $42 million, is that why it's so expensive?
It's because it's in a valley with 3 bridges. And so the Covell and Coltrane, Coltrane is a river. I mean, if you've been out there when it rains, it's where all the water is. So it is 3 huge box structures, and we can't do one without doing the others. And so it's right at the intersection. We can do some I would say with that project, it's the hardest one that we've got to do. With what we've done with the traffic improvements and the signal there, I think that buys us about 5 years as far as like the traffic issues there. I think
Just eats up a lot of money.
it does. Yeah, I agree. I would, that one to me is one that we can put off for 5 years, 5 to 7 years. We've got a signal. We're moving traffic. It closes down about once a year for rain. There are emergency service issues with that. There's, safety, as a city engineer, safety is public safety is kind of my #1 concern. So anytime you put in a signal over stop signs, you're gonna have more crashes, and we're already having that. So not saying it's gonna go away. It's a council 4-star on their strategic plan to get pretty much all of the Covell complete. But it's out there. I would say that one we would be okay with moving down a little bit on the priorities, just because we've seen the traffic go through there. We've got better movement of traffic. Right now we're seeing, so I know several people brought up the Post Road Turnpike interchange. So that's not going to be done. The earliest the Turnpike has given us on that is the mid-2030. So we've got a little ways out before we're going to start getting hit with a lot of traffic coming off of that. I-35 from 2nd Street north to Waterloo is about the same time frame to widen to 3 lanes. No frontage roads, just widening to 3 lanes. And then we've got, and at the same time we'll have a Danforth interchange that will be changing about that time. The reason Covell, that section of Covell at I-35 is on our list, we don't have off-ramps or interchanges for the 2 miles north of that. It's a high concentration of traffic. We've got a lot of growth in Northeast Edmond. We've got schools that are getting ready to be built out there. We've got transfer station that's out there that's causing some issues. So that project actually goes all the way from the intersection Air Depot all the way over to I-35. It allows, we've got a lot of safety issues right now around I-35, kind of near where our cross timbers entrances are. So that's one that there's a lot of reasons why that's ranked so high. It's the highest growth. We think it's going to be the biggest impact.
That question, Steve, in all the different planning in the committees, where do coordination with the Edmond Public Schools fit into that dialogue? And is that an ongoing dialogue? Is that, do we come alongside each other and say, yeah, that's an area that we could use some help? Or what exists with respect to that world? I really don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing dialogue, both from, the schools has shown us their plans for that site at Covell and Air Depot, with the elementary school coming first. And then they're also going to have a bus parking over there, kind of an East Edmond bus station where they'll have bus parking. So they share all that information with us. And in general, we have to say we don't have any money. We know it's going to be awful, and there's not much we can do about it without funding. So we're trying to work with them also to get more queuing within the schools so that they're not queuing out on the road. That's a continuous thing that we're always trying to work with the schools, both public and private, on those type of issues. Yeah.
Are there any of these other than the Covell and Air Depot that are specifically school, I'll say not related, or could enhance the safety of the schools because of those?
Yeah, I think we went through kind of each one and looked at those. I don't know that it shows up on here on this list. We do have one in front of Edmond North that is a very similar thing. It's turn lanes need to be added as well. So I think that's built into our prioritization is anything having to do with the schools. It's always important. I know some people have talked about looking at school safety, school zone safety. That's something that we're looking at all the time, and honestly, that's something that we can get federal money for pretty easily. So those are things that we can get federal money for, we're really good at, and so we're looking at all our school zones right now to see if we can improve safety at all those. It's the first week of school, that's all the calls I get are about related to school safety, so it's always high in our minds.
I think Richard and Todd have a question.
Yep.
As far as the schools go, because that's an obvious selling point for us with the public, it was important to people.
Yeah.
To the extent that you are able to get federal funding after we approve it in a bond issue, can we use that money for something else? That might be a...
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. I'll wait till they answer that.
He doesn't have a lot of experience with it. Yeah, the city's gonna know the answers.
I think Steve Lawrence is known for saying yes. Todd, do you have a question?
Well, I was able to take this document here and create an Excel spreadsheet out of it, and then I went back and looked at the 35 proposals and ended up doing kind of a sort that was done by staff recommendations, priority list, which is another kind of numbering system, the weighted number, which is also kind of, sometimes it shows up in those reports and sometimes it doesn't, and then also comparing it to the Edmond strategic plan, whether or not it meets the criteria of, and I found almost the top 7 items that are sorted by staff and priority lists are exactly the same. I mean, they're the same projects, so you guys must have been talking to each other,
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of wondering, as we go through and look at this stuff and look at the document and try and say, what really is important to the city here,
Yeah.
how will we kind of wrestle with some of that stuff?
Well, you could certainly ask any of us. What we will, I mean, it comes down to, the different priorities for everybody, right? It's not just where people live, but where they drive, where everybody's priorities are. I will say, so all these ones that you see, SS4A in the design process, so we've got a number of old intersections that are an older part of town, different wards than kind of the high growth right now. We've got a federally funded project, or we've got $3.6 million for doing studies on intersections. And so we're, part of our Edmond shift identified those. You'll see, like, if you go through the Edmond shift document, you'll see these hot spots for heat maps where we've got those intersections are dangerous. They're not dangerous intersections, high collision rate intersections. So we've also gone through, when I took this job a year ago, I was like, hey, I'm a former traffic engineer from down in Texas is where I started, but what a lot of driving is psychological, right? Traffic is, a lot of it's psychological. Like, so we went through and said, where are the top 10 right turn movements where we don't have dedicated right turn lanes, those kind of things. And so a lot of those lined up with those SS4A, some of the older intersections, 15th Street eastbound to turn on Broadway or to turn on Kelly or any of those high volume things, we don't have those. So those are all good projects because they will go towards public safety. A lot of people. When I raise my kids here in Edmond and I got to tell them, hey, for these specific intersections, be very careful because they're blind left turns. I mean, that's not good, right? So, safety is important as well as mobility and pedestrians and bicycles. And so, if you look at those older intersections, as well as we're going to throw in right turns and those kind of things, or medians near the intersections to stop left turns in the middle of intersections. So those are also really good. That's why they're ranked pretty high up there. Yeah. Yes.
So I served on that Edmond Shift Committee, and it was actually a great job that they did. They got an outside consultant to come in, and they brought in tons of quantified data, looking at like we're talking about, getting traffic data, where the collisions were and everything. But they spent about 3 or 4 months collecting citizen inputs on, hey, what is your biggest issue in traffic here? What intersections? What do you need to see? And so, I mean, their prioritized list was real good, and they focused on not just traffic, but ADA accessibility. A lot of people, most of the respondents wanted Edmond to be a bike-friendly city, and so a lot of their inputs had to do with bike lanes and such. I mean, I don't know how the shift priorities coincide with the staff rankings, but I mean, that's a really good data set for us to use because people have already said, this is what we want.
Right. Yeah.
Steve, go ahead, Jay, I'm sorry, thank you.
Right, so we've got $330 million worth of this page, which we have on the page. And we've got maybe $150 million. When the city passed the capital improvement projects tax funds in the year 2000, one of the projects pitched to it was the Cobell North Outer Loop. Oh, we're gonna have this North Outer Loop. Okay. Well, and we put money into it. And now, well, I'd like to see the city keep supporting that. I think that's a good thing. And when we got to the intersection of Kelly and Cobell, we had $12 million to build the whole North Outer Loop, and they said, oh, you can't do it for that. Fine. Okay, well, we're going to spend what we can. No, you can't do that. And our city engineer, and I bet you're just as good as he did, is we decided we're going to spend whatever we can now because the price is going to go up. Oh, you can't do that. And the next month, the city engineer came and said, oh, well, we went to ACOG and miraculously they moved it up on the list. And so it's only going to cost you 1/3, which we thought was good news. So all that's background. So when you get to Cobell and Coffee Creek intersections, that's about, I'm not kidding, that's about the 8th number I've seen on that. And every one of them's higher. How much can we get, /hope, from ACOG, the federal government, the Easter Bunny, anybody, to help us build that program?
So, over time, any one project, the maximum amount we can get is $7.5 million. That's just the maximum set through ACOG. As well as in any 1 year, only one entity can only get 56% of the entire pot for all the metro. Edmond's done that quite a few times where we're 56% of the pot. That's really good. The $7.5 million is good. But it's, and actually sometimes they come back and say, hey, we've got more. Like we've got Kelly and Danforth right now. Actually, it's the ended up being what we call our Phase 4 ITS. So we got 7.5 million for our ITS project, maxed it out. They came back with, ODOT found 10 million more dollars, and they came back and said, hey, people that overmatched, any cities that overmatched on those projects, because we were paying more than 20%, we were paying like 50%, that they went back and backfilled for that. So they gave us an additional 2.7 million for that. That's a project that'll start this fall. It's this federal fiscal year starting October, but we're actually able to get 10 million. Whether or not we get, it's difficult to predict what we can get as far as federal money. Lately, it's more toward safety. I think that would be my first Public Works Committee meeting I went to was when my wife was an engineer at the city. Stacy Trumbull was a city engineer, and there was a fatality at that railroad crossing, and that's what we were discussing in 1998 or 90. Yeah, I think it was 98. Is that intersection? It's moving up higher on the priority list. We just had 513 lots basically approved. Where the old pipe yards were, where the trucks coming in and out. So that's all going to be houses, right? Maybe some multifamily, we don't know. We've got a lot of traffic generation that is coming in there. So, that's one that should be moving up the list because of a lot coming in. So
It's good to hear, because that was my next question.
yeah.
Not only is 300, quarter of a mile or so east, we have another 100. We have an elementary school right there. We have a train track.
Yeah.
3 cars can turn left, and then everybody's stuck.
Yeah.
What's the average? See, 5 to 7 year. Let's say we identify we want to do that.
Yeah.
Buy the right of way, make turn lanes. 5, 7. Is that the time frame?
I would say it's generally, depending on if we're getting federal funds or not, generally it's about a 4-year. Yeah. It takes about, a year for right-of-way and initial plans and right-of-way. It takes another 18 months for utilities to get moved, and then another 1.5 years usually to build stuff. So, we did this piece out here in front of Crest. We kind of did that in record time, but, and that's another part of it, right, is the economic development. If the city didn't do, Covell and Sooner didn't make all those improvements, Crest wouldn't be there. So there's a lot of that makes it a tough decision here. So any other questions? You want to go through the list?
Yeah, can I take you back to, sorry to derail you, can I take you back to street overlays for a second?
Yes.
You said we got behind on it.
Yes.
What was the cause of that?
No geo bonds for, so when I look back, I look at some of the geo bonds of the past, and I see how cheap things were even in 2018, 2017, Broken Arrow, Oakland City. I look at the geo bonds, and the prices of construction have doubled kind of since that time period. And so, as far as, looking at resurfacing, it is, it's tough. When you get behind with asphalt roads, which predominantly about 95% of our roads are asphalt roads, the way our roads come about is they're built by the county originally, right? And so it may be this much really good dirt and this much asphalt on those center 2 lanes. And when developers come in and widen, or the city widens, they do, the standard, and we have decent pavement out there. The center 2 lanes are still awful, right? So we've saved, I would say, kind of in the early days, early 2000s, maybe through 2015, Edmond was widening a lot of roads, right? And so with that, we were reconstructing those center 2 lanes. And so that took up a lot of pavement concerns. We had a lot of, heavily trafficked roads that were being rebuilt with those programs. So those have been kind of stopped because ACOG funding is not really going toward those anymore. Federal funding is not going towards it. It's tough for us to fund those projects. So as you get behind on the asphalt and it starts failing the base, we've got to fix the base. We're doing it up on Sorghum Hill right now. We're having to cut out all the base material and then go back with asphalt. And as Jay can tell you, that's really expensive.
So how many years have we been behind the curve on that?
It's hard to tell. We haven't We haven't done a pavement assessment in 12 years. And so, before that, we kind of had a better grasp on the data and kind of knew more about it.
So if we've been that far behind, do you think, and you said $5 million would be a good number?
Yeah.
Is that a good number?
It's way more than we're doing now.
Yeah, but does it sound like, I'm thinking that the way we're talking, if we're behind the curve, it doesn't sound like a great number to me. If it's, do we want a Band-Aid or do we need to fix it? And what would cost to fix it?
So, I think that we'll go through, if there are other, like we're getting ready to construct widen Danforth and Kelly and fix, it's the highest collision rates right now. We're adding all kinds of turn lanes, a lot of accidents, no accidents.
No accidents.
So as we do those kind of projects, and if we have more GeoBond money to do, other improvements than that pavement, it's a lot of the same areas. And so, we've done a lot with little, and so in the past, and it might be appropriate for us just to kind of, since we haven't had a traffic or pavement study in a while, for us to just kind of step up. It's kind of what I was thinking of that. So
yeah, I feel like the reason that maps renewed was because people saw stuff happening. And so I think if we're gonna go after roads, and that's the #1 complaint with the residents in Edmond, then instead of putting a Band-Aid on it, I'm not saying we put all the money there. I'm just saying that instead of putting a Band-Aid on it, the residents are gonna wanna see something happening. And they're gonna wanna see a difference. And so if we bring another one of these to them, and they don't see a difference from today, then they'll vote no on that.
I would say with the $5 million a year additional, they will see a difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good
It'd
enough.
basically be doubling what you're
Yes.
spending right now.
Yeah.
So,
I'll kind of go back to the Edmond Shift project that they put together. I mean, like I said, their priorities, everything, but they also had a short-term, a 5-year plan, saying, these are what people would like to see right now, and the price of that was about $65 million. But it included a lot of intersections, a lot of safety issues, a lot of ADA bike trails, but it had a really good mix of things in there. And like I said, they laid it all out by project, by area. Some of it was trails and parks, some of it was road intersections, some of it was schools, things like that. But again, what I couldn't do is I could not match that list up with this. I know that there's overlap, but there's a different weighting for the priorities, I think, between them. But
Yeah.
that's a really good, short-term, $65 million worth of stuff that, again, if we could get it done in those 5 years, it would be very visible to the city.
Yeah, I would say that Edmond's shift was geared towards shifting Edmond's priorities less toward capacity, traffic, and more towards pedestrian, multimodal, bicycle, and safety. And so you kind of have to weigh both.
Yeah, that's what people said they wanted, though.
It's what the Edmond Shift Committee and the people that they polled on that. Our other polls, it's always traffic, and we got a brand new traffic engineer in April. He spent 20 years in the city of San Diego. I told him not to laugh at people whenever they talk about traffic in Edmond. We just have really good, we have high expectations, and that's what he's trying to meet. So that's still out there. It's still what we hear a lot about traffic. It's still out there. It didn't go away. All those other things that in the Edmond Shift are important things as well. So it's shifting and kind of putting them on an equal ground, I think.
Yeah, but they talked about a lot of road improvements, specific areas like little bumps in Coltrane, we go from 2 lanes to 1 and such that people just plug the hell out of everybody.
We are fixing the one south of 2nd Street on Coltrane. I saw that come up in an Uncommon Ground public hearing, and I'm like, I'm gonna fix that. So we're in the process of fixing it.
Steve, Bill, it's good. Somebody over here? I can wait. Oh, Bill?
One thing, Steve,
Robert, I'll show you.
and this is assuming I remember and first of all understood it correctly, but in the last bunch of material, 2.5 mil got 8 lane miles. You're talking about 5, so we're getting 16 lane miles. How many lane miles rough do you think need to be repaired yet?
So without having our data back, it's hard to tell. I mean, we can go based on best practices. We can go what we're doing now. Right now, it's costing us about we're budgeting about $250,000 per lane mile. So that's kind of what we're getting at right now.
So a 4-lane road is $1 million?
A 4-lane road for a mile, yeah, is $1 million.
All right.
Yeah.
Josh?
Yeah, there's some history, and you're talking about the intersection improvements and kind of shifting to that way of trying to move more traffic at one time at congested areas. I'm thinking of 33rd and Broadway, I think 15th and Broadway, 2nd and Bryant, and then the next big one will be Danforth and Kelly.
Yeah.
Those are all kind of the same. I've heard great things about the ones before. I think 2nd and Bryant is getting good reviews of what it's doing. So what are you using, would you agree with that those have been successful? And what are you using to quantify if it's worth doing more of that or not? How do you know?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest things is just the crash data. And it's night and day at 2nd and Bryant between before and after. It is amazing what that is doing. It is more difficult. You do have to make U-turns, things like that, for business to maintain access to businesses. As far as capacity and traffic flow through there, it's wonderful. We are able, so right now we've got 65% of our traffic signals connected live, where we can play with them real time. We can see, if there's an accident, we can reroute traffic, we can change signals live to move it around. That's why we've been spending so much money on our intelligent transportation system, is it's the best bang for the buck. For whatever geometry we have at an intersection, we can move the most people through. The 33rd and Broadway, and the one that Danforth and Kelly that we're still kind of revising. We're still trying to figure out how to, business access and everything else. We're able to see the traffic count right away. We're able to see, the level of service, the average delay time at intersections, and the safety. And those are the big ones that we look at. And so those have shown to be very successful projects.
Thank you.
Jay?
Go ahead. Do you ever see a day when the city's operational budget will take care of maintenance of things and capital improvements and bond issues go build stuff? I just think it's funny that you ask people to, when you sell a bond and finance just routine maintenance.
Yeah, I'll leave that for the finance people to answer. But I mean, realistically, that's what all cities you see around here do. If you look at Oklahoma City's last bond, like GEO bond, about half of it was roads. It included resurfacing in that. Broken Arrow was the same. All the cities around here are doing that because it's tough not to.
Everybody's behind. Yeah.
Yes, Robert. Sorry.
So this is probably splitting hairs, but, speaking to the operational or the maintenance of things, if you're talking about rebuilding or widening or resurfacing a road, isn't that a capital improvement? Because you went from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, you have to make sure the base is still there, because otherwise it will become a capital improvement if you have to redo the whole road, right? So there's kind of a sweet spot there where what we're calling maybe maintenance of what we have versus a new capital project.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Federal Highway looks at resurfacing as capital improvement anyway. And so one of the additional expenses that we have every time we resurface a road is we have to go back and make sure all the sidewalks are there and that they meet ADA. And so that was something that they made a ruling when the FHWA guy lived in Edmond and said we had to do that. So whenever you look at resurfacing as well, know that there are sidewalks wrapped into that, or fixing ADA issues or everything else. It's a capital improvement. Depending on whether you're resurfacing or doing major reconstruction, there's kind of that fine line of figuring out where that is. But
Todd?
I was just curious, you talked about complaining about the roads, but what statistically across the country, does everybody complain about the roads? I mean.
Well, yeah, I would say if you turn on your tap and the water didn't come on and you had boil orders all the time and everything else, I would say that might be at the top of your list. But as it is, since we've got, very robust utilities and, yeah, that's just the common denominator.
So people have unrealistic expectations of what the road should be like? I mean, because I've driven on some roads in some places and it's like driving on a buckboard, but.
I would just say high expectations is what I see, so, yeah.
Yes, Rick?
Can we go back to the county's involvement? I mean, can you kind of describe what the county can do in Edmond? I mean, I see signs up, this county commissioner is improving this road, and are they just blowing smoke, or?
Well, so what we've been doing and what we've always done, or we've done for a really long time, is that on our rural section roads that are usually 3 inches of asphalt on top of a really good base, usually those have to be totally rebuilt every time, right? So in the past, the county made it where we just paid for the materials and they provided the labor. And so we got a great deal on that. Now they make us pay for materials and labor, but they still give us a really good deal over putting it up for bids. And so you'll see those signs go up, but it's the city of Edmond paying the county to do that work. They reconstruct the roads and they do a good job at that, but that's what that is.
But that's only for kind of the rural roads, or?
It's for the ones that we ask them for.
Section line.
Rural section line roads. It's where we ask them to do it.
Because I know they're doing it on posts between
Yes.
Covell and.
Yes, that is the city paying for that. Just to reiterate.
So we paid for that, they took the credit.
That's how county government works.
I just want to be clear.
And there is a schedule on,
Yes.
when you go out,
It's-
8 or 10 years.
So that's on our website. We've got a schedule for kind of East Edmond roads and where they're at in the cycle. Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions for Steve related to specific projects? I've got a couple just about how you came up with your numbers. You answered that to me last week, but I think I want you to share it with the group. Contingency and today dollars. Brett Town had a good question about these things will get funded for 7 years. Could you just speak for a second to how you came to your numbers in light of the fact you're not spending that today?
Yeah, so we used full project costs. So we included engineering, right-of-way. Do we include right-of-way? Right-of-way, construction costs. So full project costs. In general, so when we did the water wastewater master plan, we put in a 50% contingency and it was not enough. And so as we went through this, we don't want to get the contingency too high, right? We want to be fairly close because going through this bond procedure, there's a lot that we need to nail down. So we used a 30% contingency on all the transportation related estimates you see here. On some of the others that we have, as far as the parks and everything else, they came up with a little bit different numbers on those. Some of those are just, is the best information we have. Yeah.
The last question I have for you, other than the 2 corrections you made, I guess 3, the overlay number you moved to 5 million, Covell and Western, you thought you could do it for $10 million less. That's the third item. And then you mentioned the idea of potentially in your prioritization, moving Covell and Coltrane lower on the list. So you're a wonderful resource for us, and it's not binding. But other than that, is this your priority for the projects that you have coming out of your oversight?
Yes.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry. Please.
What about staffing, city staffing? If this project, or if this list of projects goes through, any list of projects goes through, is there any impact to city resources, city staffing?
Yes, absolutely. So more than likely, we would look at a program manager for the first couple of years to try to get things started quickly. It's very difficult to hire staff right now, particularly engineering staff in central Oklahoma. There's a big deficit of engineers in central Oklahoma. It's very difficult to find. So we've made staffing increases recently for other reasons at the city, kind of shifting who's managing projects. So we've been in that process, but yeah, it will affect staffing a little bit.
And you can't use these funds for your personnel.
So you hire.
Yeah, you can. Yes, you can.
Well, that's different than what I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good.
And especially if you hire a program manager, you could certainly allocate those costs.
That is different from schools.
I wish it wasn't.
I know Jay had a question, and if anybody else, if not, after this, we'll ask for Casey to introduce maybe Ryan Oster, who's coming up about the quality of life.
I think Brad Brady's going to
Brad, okay, sorry, thank you. Go ahead, Jay. Steve?
Let me ask a follow-on question to what the chairman asked. This is your list. We don't have 330 million.
Right.
We're not gonna have 330 million. So if you had $150 million, what order would those be in?
I would say the same order with the exceptions of,
So
I would,
or something?
yeah, I would say with reducing the resurfacing to 5 million, I would say the Covell and Coltrane, I would bump that out to the next one. Other than that, kind of the same order.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your insight.
Thanks.
Would you be kind to introduce yourself and walk us through the quality of life that Edmond so desperately needs?
I'm Brad Rainey, I'm the Parks and Recreation Director, and since we have a shorter list, and hopefully you don't have as many questions for me.
We'll be the judge of that.
Yeah. I'll kind of just offer brief comments on each one, but just some general comments. Most of these projects come from things that have master plans, where we've done public engagement, and that's where a lot of these comes from. It's not just me. I've been here for just over a year. It's not just me, this is what we need. So this has some of that behind it. And then our cost estimates are different than streets. It's not quantities based. It's not a total guess, but it just kind of depends on what the project looks like. So just for example, replacing neighborhood playgrounds, that's a pretty straightforward project, but it depends what kind of playground you want to put in there. There's a process to get there, whether it's engaging with stakeholders. So all of these projects, there need to be some more engagement to get to exactly what it is you want. So I want to start by emphasizing the Midge Park improvements. I'm going to kind of address them in a group. This is something that exists, and it's part of the strategic plan of the council to kind of invest in what we have. And I think there's a great opportunity there at Midge Park. It's super busy. There's people, and it's not just neighborhood traffic coming to Midge Park, and they're coming there for all sorts of different reasons. So when you're looking at something that's going to appeal to a wide variety of people, I think this one's a really good opportunity. So there's the ball fields. There's a lot of different reasons why people come there, but the ball fields are not in good shape. They need some attention. And we kind of have an idea of what that costs because we're in the process of about to break ground on our Cavender complex. Infrastructure, you can read about it more in your packet, but if you look on the story map, there's a picture of a person walking alongside the road to get from one place to another. And that's something I see a lot with my office there. Basically, Midge Park has become really busy with a lot of different things to do, and it's difficult to walk from one thing to another. We have a good pathway that we just redid that goes around it, but if somebody wants to walk from the neighborhood or from the ball fields over to the YMCA, they're playing Frogger to get there. So you see this a lot. You'll see ladies with strollers. You'll notice this now that you've seen this picture where maybe you haven't before. So that's what I'm talking about with infrastructure and just moving traffic around the park. It's just there's just so many things to do there. So that's that. And then just amenities, that covers a wide variety of things from shelters to, there's one of our largest playgrounds, the Ambucks playground is at Midge Park, and we could easily spend $1 million there on an awesome, accessible playground there, and that would be the spot to do it. These are just some of the shots of the ball fields and the wonderful facilities that are there with them. So it's an amenity for people, but also we bring in a lot of people from out of town that come to Midge Park and use this. kind of in that same grouping, just your neighborhood playgrounds. That's something that we have that we'd like to upgrade. We can do some of that with the park tax, maybe like one a year, but we have a lot that need to be addressed. It's a pretty simple turnkey project that if you're looking to do something quick and have a big impact on a park or a neighborhood and hit a lot of different areas of town, that's a good opportunity. I'll look at my list here. I guess some of the other ones are more, I guess in the same one of kind of things that we have to upgrade is our Service Blake, our soccer complex. That's another master plan that's out there. It identified about $30 million worth of improvements. We're just finishing up a $5 million improvement on some of the facilities. But that's another one that needs some attention.
Excuse me, Brad,
yeah.
how was that $5 million paid?
That was out of 2017 CIP.
CIP.
And most of these things that we're doing are out of those funds in the parks. So, kind of new opportunities in the Arcadia Lake Master Plan, which I'll address separately. It did identify a potential for a new park at Post 2nd. Also in the master plan, the comprehensive master plan for the park system from 2013, it identified as an opportunity on east of I-35 to develop a park. So this kind of checks that box, but within the master plan, it identifies some opportunities. There's been some movement there with an artist interested in putting a big sculpture of Wiley Post out there and building a park that is a roadside attraction to Route 66 travelers and a pump track for bicycling. There's a lot of mountain bike trails out there and just the traditional park features too.
Do we own that land?
We do own that land. It's currently kind of being used for our water projects as a stockpile area for soil, and they're going to be staging things there for the next couple of years, right? Next 2 or 3 years. Today we just broke ground on our second splash pad in the city. It's a great way to revitalize a neighborhood and a park. That was at Ted Anderson Park on Rankin.
You mean open? They opened it.
Yeah, broke ground, sorry. Yeah. I was in the sun for a long time. That thing, cooking hot dogs and moving stuff around. Yes, we cut the ribbon today. It was awesome. It was a great event. But we just kind of put that out there. We don't have a location determined for that. But those are great projects that are just accessible to a lot of people and just improve the quality of life. And it's not as expensive as building a huge pool either, and a little bit less maintenance there. The outdoor field sports complex, this came from another study that we brought forward a year ago that evaluated all of our sports facilities and kind of looked at it through kind of your needs, but also through a sports tourism lens. And it just identified rectangular fields, 10 of them specifically, at least 10 could move the needle for some economic development with sports tourism. We don't have land for this. This is just something that was in a study that we wanted to get on this list. And then finally on there, unless I skipped over one, Veterans Memorial is going to be addressed separately. The Creek Bend Trail, that's a trail that's under construction. Originally, when we put this together, we had a lot of trails that we wanted to put forward, but they have to be on land that we own. But Creek Bend, because of the infrastructure that we're developing there with wastewater and sewer, we'll own that land. So there's an opportunity to complete that trail, and that also could be an opportunity to kind of have a project that we finish really quick off the bat.
Can you go a little further and say what that connects?
Yeah, sure. So, sorry, Creek Bend Trail, you have the Spring Creek Trail that goes from like Lake to the hospital, and it kind of terminates under I-35. So that connects from there all the way over to Coltrane. And so it gets really close to connecting our trail system from basically Mitch Park all the way to the end of the lake. Oh, got a map there. And so it'd be, this specific project is to finish this middle section. The red section is being built to spend some grant funds. So, and then the lake projects, as many of you know, we just adopted a master plan at the lake, and there's a lot of great opportunities there. It identified just over $40 million worth of projects. that's stuff above the ground. There's also work that needs to be done underground with pipes and water lines and things like that. But as you know, we don't own that land. The Corps of Engineers owns the land. And I know there's another way to address that, but just one thing to keep in mind, when we do new things at the lake, like build a trail, it takes a while to get approval from the Corps. I think Steve mentioned 2 to 7 years. It's kind of what it is, but like we have a trail that's, I've been here just over a year. It's been at 90%, it's basically designed, and we're waiting to get approval. They need to go through their environmental process. So that's just something to consider as we're looking at something that we need to get done in a certain period of time with the lake. So I'll stop there. Feel free to ask me any questions or things that aren't on the list.
When you're talking about the softball complex or Kaplinger or the soccer, are there user fees that are charged to the teams? And have those been looked at as far as maximizing the amount of revenue we can get out of these things when we're making capital expenditures like this?
Teams are charged user fees, and they pay a small amount to the city. It's something that we continue to look at. We just went through it with pickleball. They're going to pay a lot more than they were before. I don't think even if we did that, it would get us anywhere near to do any capital improvements. And just something to know, especially the complexes that have a lot of grounds maintenance, like mowing and striping and all of that, those clubs are providing that, and there's a large expense associated with doing that we don't, our staff doesn't bear, or the city doesn't bear the burden of the day-to-day maintenance and operations.
Thank you.
Hey, Brad, I'd top on that. I think when you're sports folks, your money comes from economic development. So when EEDA did a study on a soccer tournament last year that provided a $7+ million economic impact for a 3-day tournament. So that's where you get your revenue from sports. You're not going to make it up from the players and the teams and stuff.
You mentioned the veterans park.
Cujo's going to give a couple slides on that in just a second, Brad. Todd, go ahead.
Is there, I'm sorry, somebody else?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, is there some reason why you didn't go ahead and rank these projects? It would help us, I think, to kind of understand that. And then the other thing is, how are you going to address like long-term care and maintenance of these things? Because a lot of these are going to be pretty intensive maintenance issues. So how do we address that?
Yeah, I think, kind of talking about it last meeting, there's not a real objective way to rank these because, I can give you my opinion, and I tried to emphasize the Mitch Park improvements for what we're trying to do here. That's my opinion, but that's can be somewhat subjective. There's not like, well, for pavement, you have the pavement management index. You can kind of come up with an objective number or look at crash data, and there's things like that. But
well, I'd be curious about your opinion too.
Yeah, and really, and that would be my opinion, is to focus on things that we have. So the maintenance is built in. We're maintaining Mitch Park. We have staff there to do that. We have a park tax that supports the maintenance of Mitch Park. We have partners that help us maintain those things. But an upgrade, they're just kind of coming due that it's more than maintenance or even major maintenance. Some of these things just need to be replaced. So that's kind of how I look at it. Those, and then what's most accessible to the widest part of the population. So I would look at things like Mitch Park improvements, adding a splash pad, replacing playgrounds at neighborhood parks. Those are things that I feel that everybody can access and kind of the community can get behind. I love sports and things like that, but if you're just to have soccer as a standalone thing, soccer people would love it, but maybe you're a basketball player and be like, why would I vote for that? But,
Josh?
The new park at Post Road and 2nd Street, is that $8 million, is that enough to do the pump park? Is that including the pump park in that?
Yeah, so that's straight out of the master plan. So in that particular master plan, they went through all the projects and gave cost estimates. I believe it was in the $7 million range. So we've kind of rounded up on that one and put $8 million. So a lot of these, it depends on what kind of pump park you want to build.
Right.
How fancy do you want to get? Do you want to have paved in asphalt or just dirt? Or And that's the case with all these projects, even with the ball fields at Mitch Park. Do we want synthetic turf everywhere, or do we want to have a more traditional park? And so there's a lot of variability within the price.
It's like, well, and the reason why I bring it up, and man, this is the hardest list to choose from, but it, you know, a lot of our mountain bikers go to Bentonville, go to Arkansas, and it's turned into an economic impact kind of thing, and it's also turned into a way to recruit young people to your community. It's a quality of life thing, and so that's why Caleb and I got to work on the Arcadia Lake Master Plan, and we were pushing for it as a component in that. But I also think of, I'll just say this out loud, when I think of, we're kind of thinking about transportation and roads, transportation, multimodal. Trails have always been super popular in Edmond. They just always are as a component to that. And not that, I mean, this is a trail, but it's also a biking community too. I would probably expand that and say, not only are our trails popular, but just things for our bikers and people that are active. We're an active community for a lot of different ages. And so I just wanted to go in a little bit more on that particular project to make sure that when we're talking about that one, if we're considering that one, it's a mountain bike track or it's a pump park if we're having that on the list.
Can I jump on right behind you on that?
What's that?
Can I jump on right
Yes,
behind? So
yes.
with owning that land, I understand the 25 million for the Arcadia deal is probably not realistic for this go bond, right? Just because of all of the logistics to it. But all the access to this park is through Arcadia Park, right, over by the dam office. So we could label this thing Arcadia Trails because it's on the Arcadia Trails. And that way you get your trails, you get the name Arcadia in there, you make a lot of people happy with just that park.
It could connect to
it. It is connected.
But like road access would not go through the park.
Right, but right now to get to this, you have to park over there by the dam office. Right.
Also,
I think it
will
will come with its own.
For the mountain bike trails, yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions for Brad?
I just got one, related to Mitch Park. I mean, I assume you've got real specific improvements that would go along with that item on the package, so people would know how they would hook onto it as far as why they'd want to support it. Is that too much to ask, or?
Yeah, we have specific improvements. I think they're somewhat listed in the packet there, but there's been lots of master plans or conceptual plans for Mitch Park. I wish we had a more recent one. That's a project we're going to be doing this year, and I know it's going to identify lots of improvements that need to happen. But those are just kind of ones that I know are out there right now. I mean, there's also potential development of the west field or the rugby field off Santa Fe too that could be included on. We talked about rectangular fields possibly out there, or I don't know, that hasn't been determined yet. But,
I think, Brad, I'm glad you have I know you mentioned the soccer being, soccer mainly, we used to have Friday night lights there. Part of, I think in reading, I think part of the money is, a lot of it's irrigation and turf management, which is the poor quality part of it. I was talking to a lady the other day in Tulsa, she said, man, we love coming to Edmond and come to soccer tournaments and things, but I said, the fields aren't as good as a whole lot of places. You can go to Wichita and turf fields, you can go to lots of different places. So I just want us to keep in mind, these aren't all completely quality of life projects. There's a lot, as Brian pointed out, a lot of economic development potential in finally capping here. I mean, I think we originally had it scheduled for back during COVID.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's now going to, and Andy's wrong. It was way before him, because I remember 1973, that thing is still the same as that. And those kids got more guts than I do to get their nose down for a ground ball, because it's horrible. And full of stickers, goat heads. So, I mean, these are things that aren't just parks. They're economic development opportunities for Edmond.
I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, but I don't want to cut anybody off. I know Cujo's got a couple comments on the Veterans Memorial, then I want to hear from the fire department. So, any other questions for Brad at the moment?
Yeah, I do. On the Arcadia Park, it is catty corner from an existing park. The Route 66 place where the ball fields are and so forth, which you have to drive back there, I bet it's 300 yards before you actually get to the playground. And it was a real challenge because it was, I think maybe it was in the floodplain, but it was brought up in order to put the ball fields there, and it's really a good looking thing if anybody ever uses it. But there's another 4 quad that's built there, or not there yet. So my questions are, why don't you build it where you already have the infrastructure? And 2, is the new one supposed to be out, is it high enough to be out of the floodplain?
The new,
The 13-acre.
The Arcadia Park.
oh, I think it's out of the floodplain. I know it's up really high with a lot of dirt, but I'll look to these guys, yeah, it is. Yeah, that whole area on the other side is all floodplain, but the south side of Route 66, for the pump track that Josh talked about, that is out of the floodplain.
And and the softball field gets used a ton now because of the
Brad,
operator
thank you.
that's there.
Is Mr. Denton going to present, or Chris here? I don't see
Did you want Veterans Memorial first?
Awesome, thank you so much. Cujo, please.
Hey, thanks, sorry, I apologize. All right, yeah, I'm gonna stand up if that's all right. So I chair the Edmond Veterans Memorial Advisory Committee, and our job was to design and get this Veterans Memorial built over at Bick and Rudkin Park. I usually give about a 30-minute pitch. I got 25 slides, but tonight 5 slides, 3 of which are pictures. So that would be what our flag plaza and history walk look like. And so let me hit the next slide. So the way I tell it is that the history of Edmond is tied to its veterans. The city was founded by Civil War vets on both sides of the conflict. A lot of them are buried over in Grace Lawn Cemetery right now. But the city has about 5,000 active duty Guard and Reserve members out over here. I bought my house in 2003 when I was an AWAC Squadron Commander Tinker. And I would tell people all the time when they ask me, hey, where do I live if I move out there? Get to Edmond, get to the schools over there, go buy yourself a house. There's also about 10,000 DoD civilians, contractors, and retirees up here. Not an exact list, some of those are overlaps. You may have like a Guard guy that's also a contractor, but about 15% of our population has some ties to the military. Pretty diverse group. They're not, they won't all agree on everything, but they're very civic-minded, very community-minded, and they take their right to vote very seriously, so they will turn out. They disagree on a whole bunch of stuff, but they also do agree that, hey, a community that supports the veterans is important to them. And so whenever I talk to groups like that, they're all very much in favor of kind of bringing this project to fruition. American Legion, the VFW, Daughters of the American Revolution. So they will come out and they will support this. And I think it's really important if we get this onto our list of parks and recreation, that we really highlight this on that ballot measure to show people, hey, this Veterans Memorial will be one of the things that gets built with these funds. That'll give us the turnout. I think most of them will come on out and kind of vote in favor of this. We've been at this since 2019 when the City Council approved this, and our job as the committee was to design it and then to raise funds for it. We did a great job of the design, but we are a bunch of amateurs as far as fundraising goes. Pretty much my only life skills are overthrowing hostile governments and taking down air defense systems. I do not know how to raise money. So
We'll take it.
So out of the $8 million that this takes, I think we've raised about $25,000. Is that about right, Jane?
$23,240.64.
There you go. And I think we got about 5,000 of that in the last week when we did a 5K over at Mitch Park yesterday. Anyways, so bottom line is we're not going to get this built taking the fundraising route. So I'm really glad that it's on this GO Bond task force to help us out with this. Can we hit the next slide? So that will be the entrance for those of you who know Bick and Rudkin Park. You kind of come in there, there's a little old house over there too, the Fisher House. We have a pavilion built over there with bathrooms. This would be the entrance to the Flag Plaza and the History Walk, you see. Next slide. So we're really going to really improve the park. We're going to make those trails ADA accessible, a great landscaping plan to put some native trees in there that will bloom throughout the year. We're going to have a history walk out there. We're working on that with the History Museum. Amy Stevens kind of helping us out, showing us, hey, what was it like from the 1890s all the way to today? And what's going to, I hope, make this unique is a lot of Veterans Memorials have a flag plaza, some service plaques, and that's about it. We wanted to make this uniquely Edmond to show, hey, what was going on here at the home front? What was happening during World War I with bond drives or metal drives in World War II? How did the community come together and kind of highlight what was happening here as well? So I think that's really important for everyone to kind of see that, hey, it's not just about the veterans, but it's about the families that stayed here as well. We're going to put a fishing dock over there by the pond right now. The pond is great, it's stocked with fish, but you got to kind of stand in the mud, so fix that up. And then double the number of parking lots in there. One of the things, I think it's on there, so there's the dog park right over there. We also want to have a memorial for military working dogs and service dogs. So I think that'll kind of really improve that entire area. Next. And then here's that history walk. So this will kind of take you a path all the way down to the end of it towards that fishing dock. And we're going to highlight not just the history, leave a big open end towards the, for the future. There's going to be future conflicts, and so we'll end up having plaques for the next 50 or 100 years. But there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your service, for your passion. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to present that to us. Do we hear from the fire department, please, in a non-emergent way? Yes. Please introduce yourself and then give us a little where we are.
Yeah, awesome. My name is Chris Edmond. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of the Edmond Fire Department. I've been with the department for 24 years. So first off, Chief Goodwin wanted to apologize for not being here to present today. He is in a much cooler climate than we have here, enjoying some time off. So I get to live vicariously through that. So thank you for your dedication on this committee. Very, very important piece as we go through this time in Edmond's history. So thank you for being here and dedicating your time for that. So first up on our project list, I want to talk about Fire Station number 3. As you see in your packet, that's about a $9 million relocation. The current fire station is 41 years old. It was built in '83. And it is not even the oldest station that we have, but it is the worst condition that we have. There's lots of issues over there, and it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery sometimes. This weekend, just ironically, this weekend, one of the AC units went down at that fire station, the 2 units that it has, and so it left half of the station without air conditioning. And so the crews over there spent last night in the gym floor because that was the area that did have air conditioning. So it was just ironic that that happened, but there's some of the issues they have over there is the old roof, the HVAC, lots of plumbing issues. Some of the plumbing is actually coming up and raising up from the tile in the bathroom. Not sure why that's happening, but it's really weird. One of the biggest things, if you're familiar with this fire station, this is one of 2 fire stations that we have that don't have pull-through access. And so what I mean by pull-through, meaning the fire trucks return from a call and they pull in the back and they face out front ready to respond to the next one. With this particular fire station, this is a back-into fire station, okay? So every time they make a call, and this fire station, Station 1, 2, and 3 share equally on how many runs. They take over 2,000 rides each year just out of this fire station. And every time, that doesn't include going to the grocery store, getting supplies, all the other things that they need to do. Every time they return to this fire station, they have to pull out onto Danforth. They'll come around from this direction and wait for traffic to be cleared. Then they'll pull out and stop traffic if there's traffic coming, and then back into the station every single time. Hopefully we never build another fire station like that, and we shouldn't. So that's one of the downsides to that. Just lots of issues over there. I will say that in the CIP funds and in your packet, there's $5.6 million that are earmarked from CIP for that. It is just a placeholder. It is not on the books. It's just a placeholder. To give you an example, we had $2.2 million set aside as a placeholder for Fire Station 1 to do some reconstruction over there a couple of years back. We weren't ready to do that because we thought that may not just need a big remodel, but it may need actual rebuild, so we did a study on it over there. So we didn't spend that money, so that money got used for something else, which was much more important at the time. So I just wanted to make that clear that it's just a placeholder. It doesn't mean that there's $5.6 million ready to go to put into that. The next project, Fire Station number 1, that was built in '76. It's 48 years old. Some of the issues over there, it's fixing to have a new roof. The plumbing underneath that is all cast iron. And during COVID, one of the things that we did was we added extractors and washers and dryers to all of our fire stations. So an extractor is a commercial washer that's only used to clean their bunker gear from structure fires. And then we added a washer and dryer, and that's per some NFPA stuff that they really wanted us to have, and we had the funds to be able to do that, so we put those washers and dryers in there. My story with that is they took the hose tower, which you can see that tall tower at the back. That's a hose tower, which is typically used for stringing up your hose up and over and letting it dry after you wash it. Well, we took that, since we have new types of hose that doesn't need to be dried, it's a synthetic hose. We can just clean it and put it right back on the rig. So we took that hose tower, and that's where we put the extractor and the washer and the dryer. So you open up the hose tower, there's a washer and dryer. And we had to cut into the existing infrastructure to put the plumbing in there. On the back side of that is a public restroom. When they cut into that, the cast iron was so bad that they had to cut it back and cut it back and cut it back, almost going underneath that restroom to be able to find something that was solid enough for it to grab a hold of that would make it work. So that was pretty concerning. One thing with Station 3 and Station 1, since it's a relocation and a rebuild, a really important factor to remember is that we will have no additional personnel cost on that. That's a huge benefit for us. Personnel costs are 67% of the fire department's budget, is personnel costs. So we're very thankful for that. Just to give you some more generic broad information, last year we ran 10,668 calls, 65% were medical calls. Again, the 67% of the budget is personnel cost. We have been very, very blessed to have a healthy reserve over the years in managing and budgeting. So to give you an example, we had $24 million in our reserve. That's great. But with the one swipe of the pen to build Fire Station number 6, which we are currently building now, that's taking $8.1 million right there. So automatically down to $16 million. The other factor with the Fire Station number 6 is the personnel cost. We have to hire 15 people to staff that station. That's about $2 million every year. So when we look at the budget forward about 5 years, our reserves are expected, using the rates, expected to be about 0. It's very concerning for us. Some of the things that we do to help manage our money wisely, we have a fleet fund. So all of our fire trucks, and for Station 6 we have to order new rigs, new trucks. Those trucks, just an engine is about $900,000. Very, very expensive. A ladder truck, like we have at Station 2, is about approaching $2 million. So one of the ways that we've managed our money is, many years ago we were able to make sure all of our vehicles were paid for. And then at that point what we did is we started paying ourselves the anticipated cost to replace that 10 years from now. Budgeted out over 10 years, so we currently make those payments to ourselves. So 10 years, when the service life of an engine goes out, or any truck goes out, we are able to take the funds out of that we've already paid forward to ourselves and write a check for that new vehicle. So that's just kind of an extra bonus, but that's some of the things, how we like to manage, and we try to be very diligent with our funds. Again, with Fire Station 6, that's would have been a capital improvement project, right? we were very blessed to have those reserves. And I thought it was great for Chief Goodwin and the rest of the city staff to work together to say, hey, look, we're going to take care of it this time. We're very concerned in the future about what that budget's going to look like. One thing, now let's talk about the third one on the list real quick. So after last meeting, we had some more information that potentially post the Turnpike post access road is going to be further out than what we anticipated. So we got together and we're like, hey, we might be able to make this a lot easier on the committee and eliminate number 3, which is potentially right, because we don't see the fire station going out east until probably about 7 years. So I wanted to throw that out there, but I will tell you one thing to think about with fire station number 7, which we don't know, we call it an east fire station, right? We have purchased land up in the northeast section for a fire station, for a future fire station, but nothing in the southeast. And we're holding off to decide which one is going to go first. If those off-ramps get put in there, guess what? That may potentially be where the next station goes, out east. If it doesn't, there's a hiccup, or there's a delay in it, we may go ahead and put it on the property that we have up there on the northeast side, right? What's very important, so east of Douglas, last year, we made 200 calls, all east of Douglas. That's not very many calls, right? Why would we put a fire station out there for such few a number of calls? Well, that's today. What's it going to look like in 5 years? Quadruple maybe, something like that. That's still not that many rides. We're talking about station 1, 2, and 3 will take 2,000 rides a year versus a 200, or anticipate 5 years from now, maybe 800 rides, right? What's really important for us to think about with those East Edmond fire stations is our ISO rating. And our ISO rating is what helps to base your insurance for your home, business, right? Those are very important factors. Just a real quick story. A couple of years ago, I received a call from somebody that lived in East Edmond. At that time, the house was about $1.5 million, roughly, right? They were rated an ISO 4 at that time, okay? It should have been rated a 10, but they were rated a 4. They paid rates on a 4 for several years. Their insurance company caught it, that they were 5.1 miles away from the closest fire station. It went to an ISO 10. That automatically raised their insurance rates on that one house, $7,000 a year. $7,000 a year for that house. So multiply that by how many homes are out there, and that's why we think if we do a northeast fire station and a southeast fire station all out there, we can cover virtually 100% of Edmond within 5 road miles of any property inside Edmond. That is a tremendous amount of savings for our residents. So that's what we're looking for in the future. So really, those east fire stations are very important about calls. We want to get there sooner, prevent loss, get to the medical issues. But ISO is also a major contributing factor into us wanting to put those stations out there. So with that, again, with the project number 3, or that east fire station, it's dynamic. We know that everything is dynamic, and that's why I wanted to tell you if that off-ramp is going to be delayed any further than that, it may not need to be included in this particular geobond. And it depends on how long you do your geobond for. So just want to give you all that information. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Chris?
Josh? Yeah, are you able to say if Fire Station 3, when it relocates, the current Fire Station 3, and maybe you already said this, I don't know if I missed it, would that be available for AMR?
Great question. And we have discussed with them, and right now they would love to take that, because then they would have 2 facilities spread out instead of just the one location that they have. So, yes, absolutely.
Let's say,
Ambulance service.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. the
So we're
ambulance service,
thinking
they-
safety, traffic safety, 911 calls, it's kind of two things right
Yeah,
there.
it definitely helps. They are leasing from the city the old fire station number 2. They're on 13th and Broadway, and then we moved the new fire station to the west on 15th Street, west of Kelly. They're leasing the old one right there.
And they would stay there, right? Even
They
if
would stay there and
expanded.
then have
Okay.
that other one as an addition.
Okay.
That would be, that's the discussion right now.
Okay.
Things could change, obviously,
Sure,
but
sure.
I think that, in the electric and water department used that old fire station 2 before
For
DMR
meters.
came in. Yeah, for meters, exactly, which was a great
Yeah.
thing also, too.
I like there's a lot of efficiencies in you guys getting to a better location and providing that for another ambulance service in a dense part of town.
It gives them more room to put some of their ambulances, not park them all outside.
Sure.
Some of them outside,
Okay.
put some of them inside, let's have a restocking. It just makes more sense a little bit if you look at the way we do fire stations, we spread them all out, right, for logistics reasons. So,
Yeah.
it'd be the same case with them.
Thank you.
You bet.
I just want to say thanks, I'm impressed. I didn't know firemen thought about ISO ratings.
We
It's
have
not
one
just
now.
cost. There are a number of companies that won't write ISO 9 and 10, so it narrows down that homeowner's options and availability of coverage.
It does, and so I'll add to that a little bit. So an ISO rating, we talked about what that means. And so literally 1% of all cities and departments across the country, 1% are ISO rating 1. Edmond is a 1. We have our 1 rating as of November of 21. So we will maintain to keep that. And even in the non-hydrated areas, we're an ISO 2. So that's amazing in itself. It really, really does help in a back way of cutting costs down to our residents. So, next question? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a proposed location of where your relocation would be if this is granted?
For which one?
For number 3.
So number 3 would be at East Edmond Fire Station, right? And we've already got the land in the northeast up there off of.
Fire station.
Oh, sorry, Fire Station 3, are you talking 3?
Yeah.
Fire Station 3, we already have purchased the land for that. And it's at Danforth and Kelly, just to the south there. You know where Sherman Williams is? It's just to the south of that right there. There was an island of land, 4 acres, I believe, and we had them put a road in between as a return access as part of the deal. And we own the south part of that, between that new road, and there's another road before you get to the detention over there, detention pond, if you will. So we have already purchased that. We purchased it in 2023. And so we're good to go on the land. Yep. And then Fire Station 1 most likely would be a rebuild on the same site. So we already own that land too. And with that particular site, we have the agreement with the UCO, which we bought that property from, that we would always maintain a ladder truck there. Smart on their part, to force us to keep a ladder truck there for 2 big buildings. So that's part of the deal. Other questions?
Anything else for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Thanks everybody for your questions.
Thanks.
I'm mindful of the time. Our next agenda item, however, is number 5, discussion and consideration of mill levy and term between authorizations. This is a big item, and I'm not in any mood to rush things through. I think there's good dialogue going. That's why I wanted to have some at the beginning in case we ran out of time based on the commitment of 8 o'clock. I didn't know there was a commitment at 8 o'clock until someone told me that last week. So I do want, I guess I'll entertain discussion about it just for a few minutes, because if we don't do something tonight, and I'm not presumptuous about what this group wants to do, then I would imagine that's going to be the very first thing on the agenda when we get together a week from tomorrow night. I think that's my expectation. So, but again, I said last week, I'm here just to help our dialogue. So I heard people say they heard certain things, 10, 15, 12, 7.5. I want us to be very mindful of that. It certainly dictates. It's not a complicated chart Chris went over with us. I'd like Chris just to mention how he came up with the numbers and the issue that I kind of fumbled over about the growth on the ad valorem on there, just really quickly in case people have questions about how we got to this point. So if you don't mind, would you give us a minute Chris, is that okay?
Yeah.
You may remember Chris would be okay, he was here last week, and in case anybody had any questions for Chris, because some questions came up, and I answered part of one, and Kathy answered part of one, so this is Chris's chart.
Yeah, so, I mean, back to, and I don't think we have it.
I'll get
just
there.
the comparison with the other communities, which everybody talked about. One thing we just showed the levies based on population. So one thing I want to throw out is that, hey, it's all about the quality of life in Edmond and whether people want to focus on the project. So, for example, Nichols Hills isn't on there, but their mill levy, they do bond issue every year, and their mill levy is approximately 30 mils. And they pay for their, they want nice streets, they want good sidewalks, they want a lot of things, and their citizens want to live in that type of community, and they're willing to pay for it. So, I mean, this isn't an exclusive list, we just kind of were showing the similar towns in size, from largest to smallest. So back to this, we use 2.5%, we're using quick bond issues. Each bond issue, we're going to issue bonds every year to maintain a levy. And once again, if we need a bigger project, we can skip a year. We'll make it as efficient as we can. But 5-year bonds, so each bond issue would pay off in 5 years. And the reason is, I mean, we're targeting a levy, and part of that's going to pay principal, part of it's going to pay interest. So the shorter that bond issue, the less principal is being, or the more principal is being paid and the less interest, right? So we're doing that to basically make it as efficient as possible. So with that, issuing bonds each year, you can kind of see it from there. So, go right in the middle there, 7 years at 15 mils, it's going to get you 156 million approximately. Kathy brought that up, and that's a very good point, is I'm using 2.5% growth, once again, to be very conservative, and you've averaged 6% growth. So what happens is, once again, it's a little bit of a tail wagging the dog to target that mill levy each year. There's a thing called the estimate of needs that comes out where it's recalculated by your CPAs and us, and instead of doing maybe a 14 million as a plan, we do 16 million. So you run out of your capacity. So if you went out and said, hey, we're going to authorize 150 million, we may get it done in 6 years, right? And so that just means you'd have your next election if somebody chose a little bit sooner. So questions,
Chris?
Yeah.
Thank you for the refresher on that, I really appreciate it.
Can I throw out one idea?
You can, please do.
We could probably mess around on the margins between points and years and everything, but maybe one of the easiest things to agree on is what's the max that we're comfortable with? Do we not want to exceed 15 mils in 10 years? We want our target to be somewhat below that, and then we can kind of move around there. And my gut feel is, if you're against the bond, you're going to be against 7 years, you're going to be against 10 years, you're going to be against everything, right? So, we may not even want to argue too much about the time frame, but, we can at least agree on what the cap is, and then say, all right, what is about right to get what we want done? Because if you're for it, you're going to vote for this thing. If you're against it, there's really there's no sweet talking to kind of convince somebody to come on board. Maybe a few things in the ballot, but again, just to aid our initial decision making.
Thank you. I would be thrilled to hear from some people who haven't said much yet, if you feel so inclined. It's tough for extroverts like me. I tell myself when I get here I'm not going to talk, and then I do. So, but there's wonderful people here that haven't said a word, and if you'd like to say something, I would invite that now. I promise you won't lose your birthday or anything. And any other comments related to this item as we move forward?
I just want to say we had confidence you would talk.
That's such a good thing. Thank you, Phil.
Question, so are
Yes,
you
ma'am.
proposing for simplicity, we say, we have these 10, 15, 20, let's zone in on 10 to 15 range, and then adjust 11 to 14, and then meet somewhere? Is that what you're suggesting tonight?
Yes, to cap it off, saying we're not going to go blow past this number, because it'll change based on the projects we approve. I mean, what if it turns into 15.01? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
But at least we kind of know that we get a warning that we're kind of getting close to that line.
So with a show of hands, is the 15 number generally the number this group, do we show hands? At the max. At the max.
15 mils or 15 years?
15
mils.
mils.
Say 15 and
Is
15.
that, there consensus around the 15 is the general max?
I'd feel comfortable.
I'm for higher, and I tell you this, I spoke last week and said, dream big. This will be whatever we said, I think will be the same thing that comes back for reauthorization next time, whether it's in 5, 7, 10 years or whatever it is. I have not seen very many cities have a political appetite to change the mill levy the next time it comes back up. Right, you mentioned if you can get the first one done, it's easier to re-up it. And it's re-up it at the same thing because of the no new tax idea, right? So, I'm a bigger fan of something more than 15 mils. I'm a big fan of the 10 years. And I think when we look at the list of wishes, that adds up over $400 million, and it's all carryover from the last 15 years worth of studies. It doesn't even go out about what you're dreaming about.
So what's that max? Is 20 the max or is 18? Like what are you thinking? Throw a number.
I love the $300 million. I do, yep.
The only problem for swinging for the fences like that is if we get knocked down.
That's fair.
I would rather personally do a 15 on 10-year, get this thing passed, and then come back a few years from now. I just think that's too big a swing for.
I can respect all of that in here amongst this committee and everything. I'm just telling you, I don't think you'll find the political appetite to raise it later. And I agree that anybody that's going to be against this is going to be against any level we put out there.
Aren't we at least Broken Arrow? I mean, come on. 16, you know, if you think about 15
Their
or
sales tax is
whatever.
less.
I mean, you
Part
start
of the
thinking-
DR, that's our motto.
Yeah.
What were you saying, was that Kristen or?
I said their sales tax is less at
Oh,
Broken
okay.
Arrow,
Thank
so
you.
like it's
Sorry.
like this balance, right?
There is a Tulsa County tax.
I was gonna say, their city sales tax is less.
Yeah,
They have county taxes that are not on there.
And keep in mind on the report that Chris gave us on the levy numbers, like Nichols Hills is like 1.25 or 125 millings, 127 I think, or 104. So we're showing this related to the city on the spreadsheet that Casey brought up a minute ago. So not the overall ad valorem tax burden for that house. It was related to the millage from the city.
Correct,
Yeah.
just the city.
Right.
So
you look at
it's
the-
way over.
Yeah, my brother lives in Nichols Hills. I'm thrilled he pays 25% more ad valorem tax. There's like 127 or something, or 104 or something like that. So just so we're clear on the overall tax burden, if anybody cares about that issue, So I've heard, there doesn't appear to be a consensus on a cap, but there is a lot of interest in that, as far as where we are, not a cap, but where we might be. Other dialogue, comments, good, of the group? Yes, Jenna?
If
Janelle, sorry.
hypothetically this fails, is there another potential opportunity for a lesser amount to be put back on the ballot for the future election?
Yeah, you could try the same amount again, yeah. Yes, but absolutely. The city council could vote to put it on a future election, just about any council meeting.
There's also a reason you want the November election. Wide variety of ages and everything. that come out of it.
So Kathy, was the charge to this group to come back with these 2 or 3 items, the millage rate, the projects, and then the city council does what they want when they meet in August, as far as any or all of that, or what do you expect to come from us that they do?
Well, I mean, they are looking for a recommendation on a list of projects, and that project list just by default would reflect a mill levy or length of time, the combination of the two. If they decided that they wanted to add a project or two, that number might change. And it will be their decision about whether or not to set the election for November. That isn't your decision. It'll be their decision about what to do with the 1 penny sales tax for operations. So, I mean, I think what you're really charged with is mill levy, length of time, list of projects, which are all interrelated.
So hypothetically, we could do what Jay just said, do the 10-year at 20 mils, and they can come back and say, we want 10 and 15, or 15 mils at 10
Sure,
years,
yep,
and we're
we
gonna
could.
cut off 50 million.
Yeah, that they could say that's too big of a jump for us, or whatever.
Would the smart way to approach it to be give them choices to say, hey, here's what you can get with a 20 mil, here's what you can get with 15, and kind of say, pick one from column A or.
Yeah, I mean, and in my head, I'm kind of like making a list at, the 20 mil, this is what you would get with this, and this is what you'd get with something a
So we
little
actually give them a
less.
choice instead of just one right.
And what we want is for you to come up with a list of projects that you can all, at the end of the day, support. You may not agree with every single one of them, but as a group, you can support and say, yeah, this was what the group decided on. And that I'm part of this consensus. Consensus and compromise are not always easy. I do think that because of some of the assumptions and timing and some of those things, that there may be, there's like a little wiggle room. I do think that, frankly, I'm giving you my opinion, 10 years and 20 mils is a lot for a first jump out of the, but I think that's your maximum, in my opinion. But I do think that you've got examples around the city where cities are almost levying 20 mils. Like Alan said, Chris said, Nichols Hills is doing 30 mils. Yeah. Because that's the kind of community they want. But, of course, it's a smaller area, less different kinds of things they have to pay for. But, I think that's, to me, that would be a pretty big jump.
Let me give you
16,
mine.
17 mils?
Yeah.
Maybe so.
So, here's my observation right now. I took in a lot of data tonight. If I waited until next week, I would come back with a list of my priority projects and a dollar amount to support those. That's what I would ask that we all do. We can move forward tonight on this item, and I'll certainly be happy to facilitate that discussion, but I don't make big decisions on the fly after 2 hours of data. And so, but that being said, if you have other questions or things to address, let's do that now, related to the resources that are in the room. And then that's my observation as to how I work. It doesn't mean that's anybody else's. So that's my suggestion, open to people making sure they don't leave here with a bunch of unanswered questions. Kathy, go ahead, yes.
Question or thought for operationally next week. All this data is in a spreadsheet. Is next week, can that spreadsheet be like toggled to where as we are all giving input, we can turn on and off, and that can be run by the city?
You mean as far as the project
As
list?
long as
or the calculation of mill levy?
The project budget, so that we can toggle selections and kind of quickly add stuff, so we're not all here adding our own stuff?
Yes.
Yes, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Todd?
Yes, Rick?
I was thinking back, I think it was mentioned at the last meeting, the last GO bond election the city had was for the public safety facility. And I'd have to go back and look at the newspaper reports, but I was kind of curious what that tax impact would have been for the public safety facility. I think it was about 60 million, is that what we voted? I can't remember what we voted on.
We can find that information and share it with the group.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is, that failed miserably. And,
I don't think it's because of the cost.
Yeah,
now, there's a lot of politics about who's going to be
politics
downtown and not
in it.
downtown,
Which is completely different.
but that's a good observation, Rick, because part of the thing Kathy has said to us, I think we've all said at one leg, you can't ignore any parts of the city if you do something like this. It doesn't appear. And if there's a big contingent on the public safety that thought it shouldn't be downtown, or it had to be downtown, or you're not using my land, or whatever else. So here, I think that the broader base maybe gives you a little more opportunity to not have a faction, other than the group that just says, I'm not willing to spend another nickel, and I don't want anybody moving here, or whoever that is. So I think it's a good observation, Rick.
I would just add back to what Cujo said, though. I do think to get one variable, I would get back to that, pick the tax rate, and then kind of start working on your projects, and then adjust your number of years right? So they can work down to 2 variables. So I would, and I'm not saying to do it tonight.
Yeah, thank
you guys. I do think that was a good plan.
I agree. I think it's a good, to start with that. That gives everybody a number of the, but we know the range. It's not like you're coming here and someone's gonna say 35 and you're gonna get acclamation or something, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would request or appreciate getting, if took this the other way around and said, okay, we want to try to raise $150 million. Well, that's a little bit less than 156 for, what is that, 7 years? But it just sounds better, and I can sell that. So I don't know if that's 14.92 mils or whatever, but if we could know that number, that'd help.
Yeah, we can run as, I'm sure it's a spreadsheet, it's not that, I mean, well, we'll have that available. Thank you. And yes, Cujo and then Richard.
Were there projects added, I know we talked last week about submitting stuff that wasn't on this list, are they on our packet here?
They were in your packet at the bottom of the project
I
list.
totally missed them, my bad.
Yeah.
And there's no pricing or anything with
Yeah.
them, they're just.
We didn't have the ability to get a lot of detail, but we added them to the list.
Okay.
So those can be discussed as well. And I think a couple of those may have been mentioned tonight.
Cujo, it was Cobell Parkway widening, downtown infrastructure improvements, Kelly Center Lane addition, Kelly widening, Cobell to Coffee Creek, something pickleball. South Post Road widening, sidewalk additions and repairs citywide, and a Stevenson Park Plaza.
Got it, I see it now, I totally missed it.
My question was on the spreadsheet.
Yes, sir.
At the risk of getting 25 versions of it, can you send us the Excel spreadsheet or not?
We can send it to you.
This one here, or the one that's been requested for next meeting?
The updated one.
The updated one.
Okay.
Because it's PDF now, right?
Yeah, well,
And it's hard.
I mean, we can send you the
Are you talking about,
project.
what's in the packet?
Thank you, list of projects.
Yeah.
That right there, you want, that you're looking at, is that what you're asking for? Is it?
Yeah, the list of projects.
Yes, we can
Yeah,
send
we
that
can
to
do
you.
that. That's easy.
In Excel, so.
Yes.
In Excel.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and just as a reminder, if we're looking, you have to knock off 20% off the top to leave our buffer. So when you're doing your list of projects, don't go to the backs you're talking about, leave 20% off.
Yeah.
We're talking 150 million, now you're down significantly less.
it's from a lender right there.
Yeah, yeah. You could just add it to the top.
We'll make it up.
Well, I
That's
think,
a bar,
I
Sam.
mean, right, so better's the enemy of good, right? So, the idea of, and we'll be happy to provide the sliding scale, Mr. Buxton, but we know we have room because of estimated growth and the way mills, and that happens throughout the life of the bond issue, so. But I hear what you're saying from the optics and other good reasons, so thank you for that, Jay.
Yeah.
Any other comments for the good of the group or anything before we move to the next agenda item?
So, I mean, we have.
Thank you, everybody, for your input on that. I really do appreciate it. Number 6 is citizen comments. Any citizens tonight that would like to speak? Taylor, would you mind coming to the front here this time?
Todd, can you read the sentence underneath that as well,
Oh,
please?
sorry.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is an
Just for
opportunity
everyone.
for citizens to address the General Obligation Bond Advisory Task Force. Remarks should be directed to the chair of the meeting and are limited to 3 minutes or less. Please introduce yourself.
Taylor Wilson. At its core, it is it's a sales balancing act that you're really going through. Because whatever you come up with is going to go to the public and have to get sold. So I just keep that in mind. I would also, just from a stat perspective, because y'all are leaders in the community, from a financial perspective, the community is not growing. Ad valorem, 6%. Budgeted in this project at 2.5%. From a sales tax, you're flat to slight negative. So as you look at that and go forward, it does give you another pillar in the process, but it's something to keep in mind as you go through. And as on the parks, as you sell it, if it's an existing project, you've already got the maintenance costs, and it does give you some things for sales. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Any other comments from citizens tonight? All right, number 7, comments from members of the task force.
One thing that I would kind of
Caleb?
on that is that we've got to be starting to think of some kind of sales on this deal and name this other, something other than go bonds. You know? And, because this is gonna be a big thing, the no vote's gonna turn some money out on this, I'll tell you. They will. So,
Thank you, Caleb. Any other comments from the task force members?
Edmond 2035 for 10 years.
I think a lot of smart PR people are competing for that work at some point, so.
Well, that's the question. What PR firms are we, or do we even have the solicitation for PR firms to market this in a way that would be favorable for the citizens of Edmond? Yes.
Yeah, I believe the city of Edmond is going through that process with different firms that have submitted bids for that. Kathy, do you want to speak to? Oh, sorry,
So the
thank you.
city of Edmond is prohibited from conducting the campaign. So the city of Edmond can provide public information, answer questions, but they cannot campaign. So if there is a campaign, it will have to be run by some group other than the city of Edmond. Edmond is looking to hire some public relations, public information help with the messaging and just making sure that we're staying within the lines that we're supposed to. But there's some good firms out there that, you know, for example, work with the city of Oklahoma City and work with other cities around the metro on you know, public information kinds of campaigns. So we are doing that, but at some point, an outside group will have to run the campaign, and that group will be responsible for hiring PR and marketing firms and, you know, somebody to help manage that campaign process, so.
And pay for it?
And pay for it, yes, and raise money from the private sector to pay for it.
Can we add that item to another agenda? Because I think there's a lot to say there. I think there's a lot that we would need to hear about that. I mean, what that
About
process,
what?
what that process might look like of.
Well, it is not the city's process. We have to be really careful.
No.
The campaign is not the city's process.
I understand that, but I'm.
So
we're gonna
not
hand this
your
off to somebody,
purview.
I guess, then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So are you asking for what other organizations, like, for example, the Chamber or Edmond Economic, are out there that potentially would be part of the PR campaign? Are you asking those people to come share if they're on?
I'm not sure how it works.
It also could not be the Edmond Economic Development Authority. They could not run the campaign either. They're a public entity. So it'd have to be a private sector, nonprofit typically that runs these kinds of things.
Like your new Edmond group?
I think there's a lot of groups out there that might be interested in being involved in that process. I hope
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else have any other comments for the good of the group before we entertain a motion to adjourn, so I do this correctly? Anybody else? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Brad Blundell.
Second.
Second from Sean Conrad. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you for your time. See you next Tuesday.